You fool! Warren is dead.
Welcome to HorrorBabble. The Song of Innsmouth is a 2026 Cthulhu Mythos story by the American author Aaron Vlek. A dream expedition tests friendship and resolve as two of Miskatonic's Dreamswimmers chase a vanished legend. See below for a link to the Aaron Vlek playlist. I hope you enjoy this one. The Song of Innsmouth by Aaron Vlek. Folio 237. Being a partial collection of journal entries, memoirs, letters, and esoteric tracts chronicling the activities of a group of scholars affiliated with Miskatonic University, known as the Dreamswimmers. Be it known that these Dreamswimmers remain broadly extant and highly active in the environs in and around Arkham, Innsmouth, Newburyport, Kingsport, and beyond, including Devil Reef and the farthest reaches of Dream. This collection focuses primarily on Maribeth Pickman, scion of the fabled house of Richard Upton Pickman, notable ghoul and artiste, and Casubel Carter, great-nephew of Randolph Carter, known widely for his exploits in the dreaming lands from the annals of Howard Phillips Lovecraft. I may be known herein simply as the translator. Portions of my history have been set forth elsewhere, and may be consulted if exterior interest arises or becomes germane to further research. For the sake of reference and context, I will say only that I hail from a fine ancient line of deep ones, a sad misnomer, for we have a name we use amongst ourselves, and I am fully and comfortably within the third phase of my transformation. This condition allows me to, with proper attention to dress and deportment, pass for a human eccentric from the landward side, and serves me well for my work at Miskatonic Library, where I labour night and day among the archives and mouldering stacks of that most venerable and august hall of arcana. I need bother with no such trifles of beguilement in Innsmouth, where my appearance is commonplace among its denizens, and, dare I say, celebrated by all. As for my various activities at Devil Reef, and those sacred waters beyond, such details are best saved for another time. Chorus. And thus she went, naked and glorious, into the sea. Her small shimmering body, lithe and sinuous, glided through the water, her skin catching the sun's rays like a sultan's trove of jewels, her gills fluttering gently as she breathed with ease beneath the waves. She made her way that first time to Devil Reef, where the others awaited her, sunning themselves upon the rocks, or coming forth from the depths to welcome this child to her ancient lineage, her most beautiful and accursed lineage. The Song of Innsmouth, stanza 19, Whippoorwill. 1. The Chronicles of the Marsh Family, Volume 27, 1914 to 1930. Dagon's Folly didn't stand a chance. She was the last of the once proud merchant ships to make port at Innsmouth, as she had for better than 300 years. Wave upon wave, not of life-giving water, but of ravaging flame, devoured her drooping sails. The tall, haughty mast rose defiantly above the wharf, a torch in the night, only to crash into the black, oily depths below. The whole of the ancient crumbling port had been set ablaze by those who had come in the night from the landward side. The vast canopy of night glowed crimson, and the howls of the burning hounded those who ran for shelter. A solitary pair of round, lidless eyes stared in terror at all they beheld. The flames, the burning ships, the bodies, all was reflected in the deepest fathoms of those eyes. Whippoorwill Marsh was just 9 years old. She hid, cowering in one of the decrepit warehouses across from the burning wharf, watching as the city of her birth turned to ash and cinders, her hands covering her ears so she didn't hear the howls that swallowed Innsmouth. She crouched further into the gloom as a torchlight scanned the empty room, fanning across the wall right above her head. Then the light was gone, and a webbed hand clasped over her mouth and dragged her away from the window and deeper into the shadows. The Star of Azathoth glided across the sea like a hawk toward its prey, coming to rest behind Devil Reef, silent, waiting eagerly to pounce. She could not be seen from the shore, and her black and green sails fell loosely, caressing her mast like magnificent wings at rest, the long tendrils of seaweed and glittering barnacles, the jewels of the sea, adorning her fine prow. This was the first time in better than 100 years that the ancient merchant ship had dropped anchor at land, such as it was. Her captain, Matthias Marsh, crawled nimbly over the reef to gaze at Innsmouth, ignoring the fawning hails and deferential whispers of those few remaining deep ones who clung to the reef and attempted to hide. Matthias Marsh would not conceal himself from any creature on land, upon the sea, or beneath it. For centuries he had traded with obscure islanders, with deep ones far-flung across the world, and with other more questionable folk hailing from more sinister ports of call. It had long been rumoured that the Star of Azathoth even traded with those who sailed from fabled lands beyond the earth, and that Matthias Marsh had journeyed farther into the lands of dream than anyone, and had formed pacts with certain of the old gods who were amenable to such arrangements. This is how he procured the vast quantities of the purest gold needed to fashion the spectral ornaments and regalia of title, wealth and commerce that ensured the Deep One's coffers never failed. Marsh, the Star of Azathoth's ancient captain, was a creature out of legend. Well over 6 feet in height, he was tall for a Deep One. He had exhibited the Innsmouth look early in life, a sign of great portent, and had come fully into being while still a lad. He took then to the sea upon the decks of Dagon's Folly, where he learned the seafaring trade and mastered the timeless arts of commerce. Because he had embraced the ways of his Deep One ancestors with no resistance or shame, he had never clothed his body in the raiments his kinsmen used to move among those of the landward side, and displayed his body proudly with its mottled green flesh leathered by sun and sea. For well over 2 centuries, Matthias Marsh never set his webbed feet off the decks of his beloved ship, and this had made the captain something of an enigma, a figure of dread spoken of in whispers and not believed by many to be real, even among the Deep Ones of Innsmouth. Matthias Marsh had broken this long-standing code, and prepared to come ashore because the fate of Dagon's Folly and of the people of Innsmouth was a thing he could not abide. There was another matter that drew this venerable old captain to the shore. He had 2 full-blooded Marsh sisters, Majestic and Magnificent Marsh. The fate of Magnificent Marsh he had received through the byways of her demise. But Majestic Marsh, the ancient matriarch of Innsmouth, who had recently begun her final retirement into the sea, and her young heir, Whippoorwill, were to be placed under his protection and secreted far away from this place. Chorus. And so the fabled captain came home from the sea, his ship, its oars slashing the waters like the savage blades of the Saracen horde, the unseen rowers silent but ever watchful. Matthias Marsh had not laid eyes upon the city of Innsmouth for centuries, and it was only dire need that drew the Star of Azathoth into the shallows from Devil Reef. If the ancient family dwelling of his clan had fallen, there were things to be removed from the ruins and brought to the safety of his vessel before she returned again to the open sea. The Song of Innsmouth, stanza 46. Matthias Marsh rose to his great height, his broad-webbed fingers clenched in angry fists as a hiss of rage sent those nearby cowering. He watched the flames consume the wharf and the vessels docked there. Then he let out a roar that filled the night. The Star of Azathoth raised her dark sails and made for the coast with unnatural speed. Matthias came alone to shore and strode through the chaos that swarmed over the wharf, his kind and the humans who had come down upon them. His mighty hands and claws swept aside any who tried to stop him as he ran toward the crooked old house atop the highest peak in Innsmouth. The ancestral home stood intact but empty, his sister Majestic no longer in residence, as she prepared to take the sea for the last time. Majestic's young heiress, Whippoorwill, a child who had been born with the signs of the Marsh lineage, had begun the transformation early, so Majestic had come ashore to collect the child. Entering the grand but crumbling mansion, where it rose like an obsidian cathedral, Matthias bounded up the broad marble staircase, his long, powerful legs taking the stairs 2 and 3 at a time. He sped past corridors of empty, dust-cluttered rooms and came at last to the eyrie that had been the forbidden domain of his father, and all his fathers before him. Here he ripped the leaden seals from their hinges with his bare hands, and entered the ancient library. Entering the gloom-drenched chamber, his large, black, lidless eyes came to the secreting place. This was the vault that housed the vast trove of ancient maps rendered on the hides of sea creatures, and charts barely legible upon engraved stone tablets. Hundreds of leather-bound voyage logs were stacked with rolled parchment contracts for dozens of hidden tribes around the world, along with the exact locations where they could be found, and the trade winds and currents necessary to bring the seamen of the Marsh clan to their shores. 2. Scion of the House of Pickman. The Memoirs of Maribeth Pickman. Casubel Carter stared out the window of his rooms at Miskatonic University's medical wing. A smile spread across the portly but jovial man's face as he stuck one thumb in the watch pocket of his waistcoat and downed his third snifter of grog, a concoction of his own design, of which he was more than proud. He watched the 3 figures as they dashed across the quad below, now buried beneath at least 2 feet of new snow. "So you really mean to go through with it, then?" I inquired from the old green velvet divan behind him. "Oh, yes," Carter said briskly, turning toward me and gesturing to the half-empty carafe. I declined this for the 3rd time, finding the syrupy concoction was much too sweet for a ghoul's palate. "Make no mistake about it. I will undertake this journey," he added emphatically, reclaiming his usual place in his favorite leather club chair. "Very well, then. I suppose I'm honor-bound to accompany you on this folly," I said with a shake of my head. "Maribeth, there is no one I would rather take with me than you," he said excitedly. "Yes, well, your plan does have some merit, I'll grant you that, but upon one condition." "Name it," he said. "To run off on an adventure in Dream without telling the others is absurd and, quite frankly, insulting to all of our work together. We apprise the others of our plans, or you're on your own. I'm the daughter of Richard Upton Pickman, the first of the Dreamswimmers after Darius Gilman, and I always get my way when I know I'm right." Casubel could only sigh and agree to my terms. "They may try to stop us," he suggested. "Oh, they definitely will, or they'll pester us to go along, but we'll ensure them that the journey is sound and of a merely personal nature. They'll understand, just as you understand their fear for the safety of solitary dreamers venturing too far afield." "But you won't be a solitary dreamer, will you?" I added conspiratorially. "Indeed. And perhaps my father could," I suggested. "No," he roared. "No, I don't know your father, and this is not to be some grand expedition with porters to the underworld ferrying our thoughts to some nether base camp. This is my search for my uncle, a private matter." "But your uncle and my father are friends," I reminded him gently. 3. The Dreamswimmers by Dr. Darius Gilman. The Case of Casubel Carter. Casubel Carter was unique among the Dreamswimmers in that he was just a man and held no secrets of accursed biology buried deep in his blood that would one day blossom and turn him into, well, something quite other than a man, and thus I had originally hesitated to bring him into our Carder. and Maribeth certainly had been disinclined, to say the least. But he really wasn't just an ordinary man. He was the great-nephew of Randolph Carter, master dreamer, friend and confidant of Maribeth's sire, Richard Upton Pickman, a man who disappeared forever into dream in search of the old gods and their fabled lands. He'd built quite the storied life for himself, and all but forgotten the way back to the charming little English village of his youth. The only other person to retreat forever beyond the veil of sleep was Pickman himself, whose nefarious exploits had followed in the wake of demonic transformations he had utterly embraced, if not outright sought for himself. Casubel had been no more than a lad when Randolph Carter introduced him to dreaming. They travelled to many lands, but never beyond where the boy could safely navigate, and never to those places which would give rise to nightmares and hauntings by day. And then, quite unexpectedly, during Casubel's first year at Miskatonic University, Randolph Carter had disappeared from the waking lands without a word, leaving the young man devastated. He had vowed to one day track down his uncle and discover his fate and hopefully learn more from this master dreamer. But to do this, he first had much to learn, and so the Dreamswimmers, founded upon my own work and that of my colleague Maribeth Pickman, undertook his education, and soon his dreaming began in earnest. It was not long, however, before the machinations of highly unsavory sorts demanded our attentions, and we began to focus our work more and more upon the diseased minds and evil psyches loose upon the land and sea, in dream, and the mischief they wrought upon the waking world. 4. The Chronicles of the Marsh Family. A great wail of despair engulfed the town of Innsmouth as Dagon's folly burned, and she fought helplessly to remain above the waters. That ancient fabled ship had sundered the seas and scoured far-flung islands of strange folk who came to live upon Devil Reef and Innsmouth town in days long past, and this was to be her sad fate. Out upon the waves, an answer to that cry came from the Star of Azathoth, as she bore down upon her sister ship, where she succumbed to the devastating blaze. Chorus. The scions of the houses of Carter and Pickman descended by the stairway of 1,000,000 steps into the underworld of dream, in search of one Carter the elder, Randolph by name. Declining the aid of ghouls, Casubel Carter nevertheless was accompanied by his great good friend and fiend Maribeth Pickman, herself an infamous ghoul. But forswearing the aid of ghouls in no means ensures they will not bestow that aid where they choose, for these creatures are renowned for doing as they please. The Song of Innsmouth, verse 41. 5. The Memoirs of Maribeth Pickman. Walking for days through fabulous terrains known only to the most intrepid or foolhardy of dreamers, we made all haste, not wishing to linger, and never pausing to examine the many wonders there, like flame trees that burned brightly for an eternity, while giving no heat and crying out piteously for mercy as we passed. We stepped lightly over glittering green waters that held our weight, and picked our way carefully through the lovely enchanted woods, where inquisitive little zoogs peeked out at us from behind every bole. They chittered impertinently, and sniffed our feet without remorse, but disappeared in a flash when I bared my fangs. For all their sharp teeth and indiscriminating appetites, they were, after all, such timid little things. I respectfully declined the offer of a flagon of their infamous wine, and refused any hospitality from these disreputable little fiends. Twice we passed ragged, dispirited troops of ghouls, the sole survivors of vicious skirmishes over feasting rites to ancient graveyards, too close to the waking lands to be fair game for any but the most pernicious among their tribe. Casubel and I emerged finally from those enchanted woods, into a bustling village of ancient design, with charming little thatched huts clinging to the lip of a blood-red sea. Immediately, Casubel complained of an unbearable thirst and hunger, and passing a stall piled with a variety of baked delicacies, he grabbed a steaming tart and was about to stuff it into his mouth, but I knocked it from his hand. "Eat or drink nothing here unless I give it to you," I barked, and he just stared at me in shock. The food and drink here are most enticing, but the tiniest crumb will result in a span of dreaming that could be much longer on Earth. That tart you were about to gobble up might have resulted in 100 years or more passing on Earth while we search for your Uncle Randolph. Do you want to rise in the morning and find all of our friends have turned to dust and memories? "No, of course not," he stammered. "But I am greatly in need of my dinner just now," he muttered pathetically. "You always are, my friend," I said, unable to stifle a laugh. "And at the moment so am I. But leave that to me. Now we must find lodging against the tides of night." We found a quaint whitewashed inn with a gabled roof and secured a room on the top floor. While Casubel flung himself on one of the beds, I threw open the shutters and gazed out upon the tapestry of lights in the village below and the carpet of stars above. Standing on the small balcony, I cried out once, twice, 3 times in a peculiar sort of guttural ululation, and then waited. Casubel sat up and watched as a dark shadow leapt onto the balcony, leathery-skinned, red eyes glowing like embers, and completely naked. The creature muttered a series of eerie chirps and bellows, and then it was gone, leaping from the balcony to a neighboring roof, and then disappearing silently into the night. "What in God's name was that?" Casubel hissed, jumping from his bed and staring at me. "Ha! That was Richard Upton Pickman," I said, tossing him a sack full of bread, fruit, cheeses, and wine. "Take your fill of this, my friend. My father retrieved that sack from the waking world, and you will find that it never empties. And you needn't fear, it's clean food, not the preferred fare of ghouls. But do not touch a single morsel that I do not give you, and let no meat pass your lips, because we cannot know what creature it was carved from. And some flesh will damn you to wandering these lands forever. If that happens, not my father, nor even your esteemed great-uncle Randolph, will be able to help you. Now sleep after you have slaked your hunger and thirst. We leave here at dawn. My father told me exactly where we will find Randolph's abode, and we've been in these lands far too long already." Chorus. The fabled citadel of marble and gold and sunlight that surpasses all beauty in the waking lands awaited the dreamers Casubel and Maribeth. This was the kingdom the great dreamer Randolph Carter had made his home. Maribeth knew exactly what awaited them within those golden sunlit halls, because Pickman had forewarned her. Casubel had dined that morn on mere wishes and hope-filled dreams. The Song of Innsmouth, verse 114. 6. The Case of Casubel Carter. The dreamers journeyed through many another curious terrain, and came out none the worse, although along the way many had cast uncertain glances upon them. Among these was a group of traders in human flesh, living and dead. It was only the most menacing shriek and growl from Maribeth that drove the leering onlookers to retreat into the shadows. When finally they reached the walls of Carter's city, they were met with a sea of merchants setting up their stalls. Small encampments crowded the walls, their cook fires roasting all manner of comestibles, some fair and some emitting clouds of foul, oily smoke that blackened the air. Casubel marvelled at the cacophony of folk gathered there. Many resembled the people he had known in the waking world, but many more did not. Here were wanderers whose flesh was every colour imaginable. One knot of whisperers elbowed each other and roared in snide derision as the two dreamers passed by, marvelling that they had neither tails nor fine curved horns. Others were multi-headed or beaked, winged, taloned of foot and clawed of fist, while many others defied any sort of description at all. Finally reaching the gates, they were halted by two stout black warriors mounted on tall horned zebras, caparisoned magnificently for bloody battle, their own costly raiments and pennant flags the colours favoured by Carter in the waking world. The warriors let their swords fall to bar their way, and Casubel protested loudly. "Let us pass," he roared. "We're here to see my uncle—" he began, but Maribeth's elbow stabbed him in the ribs and cut him off before he could utter that name of power in these lands. "How long before we may enter the city?" she demanded. "The city gates open to all at sunset," one of the mounted warriors said absently without so much as a glance in her direction. "Taverns, inns, all public houses open then. Now go wait with the others," the man added again without a glance, his eyes sweeping the sea of visitors waiting to begin the night's revels. "Why did you stop me?" Casubel barked incredulously. "We could have been taken straight to my uncle and—" He was cut short by an angry glare from Maribeth. "Don't be a fool," she whispered, "and keep your voice down." "But—" he began, but thought better of anything he might have said. "You don't know what kind of welcome you will receive here, my friend," she said coolly. "But he's my uncle," he insisted. "How long has it been since you stood in the presence of this uncle of yours?" she asked. "Well, I'm not sure exactly. Maybe 10 years, but surely he will remember his brother's grandson," he insisted. 10 years. But you see, for Randolph Carter, that has been over 200 years. Time flows very differently here. And for him, your family was a very long time ago, in a world far less wondrous and commanding of his attentions and his memory than what you behold around you. Who's to say he doesn't have hundreds of nephews here, and sons of which you're but one, and a distant memory of that? I say we proceed with caution, and that you follow my lead as long as we remain in Dream. And remember, we'll see your uncle if we can, and then be gone quickly, or the rivers of time will wash us far adrift of the lands we wish to return to," she explained. "These are not the dreaming lands you mastered with Dr. Gilman and our friends at Miskatonic University. Never forget that, not for 1 minute." "And if I decide to remain here? With him?" Casubel muttered sullenly, but Maribeth ignored this. They found a patch of ground not already claimed by the growing throng of merchants and rowdy gawkers, pickpockets, moneylenders, card sharps, and the usual sorts of women of dubious intent one finds in such places. Then they settled in to await the falling of the first of 2 suns that heralded the arrival of night. "Casubel!" Maribeth barked as she rousted her companion awake. Somehow he had managed to fall into what passed for sleep in the land of Dream, and he awoke with a shout. What is it?" he yelled, jumping to his feet and looking around. "They've opened the gates. We can go in now. Keep your eyes open and let me do the talking," she said, as they joined the long ragtag throng streaming into the city. The 2 mounted guards were joined by several others as they examined the wares the merchants hoped to peddle to the crowds. Very few were turned away, and even those gained entry by surrendering a few coins or small packets of what-nots common and popular among guards and others with civic benedictions to bestow or withhold. Chorus. Be warned and wary, O great traveller among the deep, lest what you think you know and seek betrays you as it flees, like dust upon an unexpected breeze. The Song of Innsmouth, verse 548. 7. The Memoirs of Maribeth Pickman. I considered carefully the course before us, having brought my friend and colleague Casubel to this place to be reunited, even if briefly, with his great-uncle Randolph Carter. For him this was a dangerous journey, that Casubel believed I merely accompanied him and did not orchestrate this expedition, did not alter the state of certain truths. There comes a time in the young Dreamswimmer's career when he must choose, or the choice will be made for him if he has the constitution to survive the deepest dreaming, and not endanger his fellow dreamers. The work of the Dreamswimmers plumbs the darkest, most treacherous terrains imaginable and unimaginable, and fortunately many turn back before they ever begin. Darius and Dr. Gilman, founder of our little band, had charged me with determining if Casubel was likely to survive our work or not. Jostled through the congested, narrow streets leading to the great palace, we witnessed more bizarre sights, and many that would sow nightmares in less seasoned travellers. Vendors hawked writhing serpents on sticks to be eaten quickly to stave off the most voracious appetites, while others huddled over steaming pots as tall as a man full of boiling meats. Few partook of this delicacy, except certain swarthy sailors with their turbans humped up awkwardly and lopsided lobes on their foreheads. Other thoroughly repugnant fellows skittered about in the dirt on tiny cloven feet, or grovelled on filthy hands and knees, chittering among themselves and gobbling up whatever stray morsels fell into the dust. Some emaciated, grey-skinned merchants eyed me curiously, bowing and whispering among themselves in excitement. One of these approached me with a choice cut of slippery grey meat tumbling out of a grimy rag. I regrettably declined this offering, and we continued on, keeping a watchful eye on the crowds in case trouble erupted, or we were detected by scrutiny I wished to avoid. "Maribeth, look at that," Casubel said, pointing to a dark smoking pit that appeared in the dirt beside us. "Look away," I said sharply. "There's another," he added, "and more over there." "I said don't look at them," I hissed. Then I nodded toward an alley where we slipped out of the crowd, and I pulled him aside and glared at him. "Perhaps one day you will be a strong and powerful dream swimmer, if you live long enough and survive this folly and return to the daylight world. You've never been this deep into the lands of dream, where even the most insignificant thing can mean death or madness or worse. This market is teeming with all manner of creatures who would feast on you like a swarm of rats if they got the chance, and you must learn to recognize them in your gut, in your flesh, and by the smell of them," I growled, "because be most assured they have already recognized you." "But I only came here to find my Uncle Randolph, that's all. Surely he will—" he began, but I cut him off angrily. "I've told you, Casubel, you have no idea what you will discover if we find Randolph Carter. I accompanied you on this fool's errand to protect you, if indeed we do find him. And it may be that familial relations mean nothing at all here, and it may mean something from which only a daughter of Pickman can protect you. Now, let's proceed. And before we go, let me tell you this. Nothing is as it seems in the lands of dream, and the most seemingly innocent object is not without its hidden dangers. Think of all you see before you as a map, and half the people here, human in appearance or not, probably mean you harm. And Casubel, every single person, every man and woman, every beggar, every child, every vagabond sleeping in a storefront doorway, every stray pair of eyes glancing at you behind a sleepy yawn knows exactly who you are, and who I am, and why we're here. Now keep moving." We pressed on, fighting our way through the swarming crowds. At one point I turned to speak to Casubel, but he was gone. I found him standing amidst a group of scabrous monks clothed in filthy, tattered robes that barely concealed their hideously swollen and misshapen bodies. Casubel swayed back and forth in their midst, his eyes closed and the spittle falling from his lips. I had to drag him away and shake him for his senses to clear. "Stay with me," I yelled into his ear. "I see you were not ready for all this," I mumbled under my breath. "I came because it was my will to do so," he barked, attempting to bluster. "Was it also your will to become food for the gods, or their slave?" "It is my will to find my Uncle Randolph." "And nothing else?" I demanded between disgust and pity, but didn't wait for his reply. We continued on, each of us lost in our own thoughts and misgivings, but I watched him ever more closely. More and more he ignored my warnings, and I suspected he sought to test me. A testing he would quickly fail. Chorus. Marvels abound in the lands of dream, but many have become lost therein, only to become prey and fodder for its hungry denizens, or to become those denizens themselves, adding to the symphony of madness that lures wave upon wave to their death. Oh yes, they may awaken, but left behind is their will to live, seduced by sirens that whisper strange promises in their ears, promises much too tantalizing to ignore. So they wander lost in dream forever, leaving their waking body behind to wither, rot, and die. The Song of Innsmouth, stanza 101, verse 49. 8. The Case of Casubel Carter. The two Dreamswimmers proceeded toward Carter's citadel, a heavy silence upon them. Casubel was in awe of the endless parade of folk on display, and the explosion of marvelous wares for sale. One rotund old geezer sold fresh zoogs on a stick, dead and raw, cooked or curried, spiced, steamed, candied, or alive and squealing, all ready to satisfy the appetites of excited diners who plopped them whole down quivering gullets. They passed huge spits that yielded up roasted human body parts whose foul, corpulent chefs in greasy leather aprons sliced off dripping slabs and dropped them into the bowls of waiting patrons. These diners were not human at all, but were impatiently in need of their evening feast, and would not behave in a pleasing manner at all if forced to continue on with empty bellies. Casubel was certain that some of these were ghouls, who nodded to his companion with peculiar signs and gestures of deference, but to which she merely nodded curtly in reply. Maribeth paused at one stall where heaps of books simmered in wooden vats, their green gelatinous brine bubbling sluggishly, and seeming to gaze at them from a solitary putrescent eye. While Maribeth haggled with the strange bookseller, a yellow reptilian fellow, naked but for a crimson-stained loincloth, Casubel's attention was drawn to a collection of beguiling glass lamps on long golden chains that burned with a roiling black flame and emitted fumes he found quite pleasing. They wandered past stalls piled with jars of corpse powder and amulets that contained ensorcelled souls executed for particularly heinous crimes, or so their hawkers claimed. Juju sticks and scrying orbs, divining rods and fortune-telling cards by the hundreds were on proud display. One booth sold priceless diamonds that melted in your mouth like candy, and brought strange dreams and a sort of death to those with a taste for such anomalous exaltations. These were almost sold out, but a fresh load of the dried skins of certain rare fauna had just been dumped on another stall, skins that conferred upon the wearer the visage powers and memory of the living creatures. Casubel wandered off in a daze of wonder. The whole place was alive with the merriment and mystery reminiscent of the carnivals he had loved as a boy. Then of a glance the mood of the place changed, as 100 faces turned as one to stare at him. Suddenly, he was swallowed up into a procession of veiled priests in wafting yellow robes that flowed from their undulating bodies as if on unseen currents. The priests were impossibly tall and slender, seeming to grow taller by the moment, their flesh surging and swelling hideously beneath their robed bodies and veiled faces. Their long, rubbery arms fluttered over Casubel's flesh, groping, probing him, embracing him sensuously, and he surrendered eagerly to their tender, unholy ministrations. A loud hiss broke the ranks of the priests, and Maribeth stood before them, her teeth bared, and her body hideously transformed. The priests bowed, and then continued on, their bodies disappearing in a fine red mist. Casubel fell in beside his companion, not even noticing the change that overcame her, or the swell of flutes that arose suddenly, and almost robbed him once again of his senses. Chorus. The dreamer grew impatient in his search for his infamous uncle, And yet his companion, the ghoul with the green eyes, watched him closely, warning him not to stray from the path she could see before them, and barring his way if ever he tried. The Song of Innsmouth, verse 90, stanza 14. 9. The Memoirs of Maribeth Pickman. "How soon will we reach my uncle's palace?" Casubel demanded, seeming to awaken from a trance. "Must we really wander amongst all this madness? Perhaps I want to buy something here," he muttered absently. "You'll buy nothing here. Anything you see that captures your fancy will disappear as soon as we leave here and you awaken. You know that. Besides, whatever you buy here may cling to your mind and eat into your thoughts like a swarm of maggots you will never be free of. But have a mind to think on everything you see. Everything here must be reflected upon. We'll soon reach the keep of Randolph Carter, and you may be surprised by what you find there. Then you can decide if you wish to remain here or accompany me back to Innsmouth." I explained as patiently as I could. "Innsmouth? What business is there in that decrepit little burg?" he demanded incredulously. "Is this anything to do with that Marsh business of last year?" "Everything is to do with that Marsh business last year. Events in Innsmouth demand the attentions of the Dreamswimmers, with you or without you," I explained flatly. "Maribeth, I must find out what happened to my uncle, besides legends." He broke off suddenly, catching himself and thinking better of his words. "We are here, and you will discover what became of your uncle, and perhaps he will even welcome you unto his hearth and home," I extolled, bowing grandly before him and laughing mirthlessly as he ran ahead and disappeared into the crowd. And then again, perhaps the legends and stories are true, I thought, quickly catching up with him and turning him around to face me. "Get a hold of yourself," I growled over the noise of the crowd. "I didn't accompany you here just to follow your uncle into infamy. You are a dream swimmer, but one who has a great deal to learn, if you remain one at all. Oh yes, if you remain one at all. Learn you will, or fall away from us so you don't stumble into peril you cannot crawl out of. The dangers we have faced in our dreaming with Dr. Gilman have been the stuff that children cut their teeth on in Innsmouth. Do you think the Dreamswimmers are just some netherworld hiking club for Miskatonic's bored underclassmen?" I roared as he cowered before me, stunned by the ghoulish transformation that had overcome me again. "Maribeth, please," he stammered, but I cut him off with a wave of my clawed hand. "You are the youngest among us, perhaps not in age, but in wisdom or lack of wisdom for your years. I did not support Gilman's bringing you into our midst, but I have held my tongue and watched, and frankly, Casubel, I have not been impressed with your comportment on our forays into the lands of dream, all of which have been far safer than the waters we find ourselves in now." "And perhaps you are not what I have always," he began sullenly. "Be very careful what spills from your lips next, or I will drag you back to your waking foolishness," I whispered through my needle-sharp teeth. "Take me to my uncle and then go," he muttered. "We'll go before your uncle Randolph, and then he can decide your fate." "Good," he roared, and then stumbled off into the heaving crowd that grew thicker and noisier the closer it came to Carter's palace. "Stop right there," I commanded, and he froze where he stood. "Until we part company, I am responsible for your thin pink hide. If any disaster befalls you under my protection, it is my hide that Gilman will hang on the wall of his library. So, until we part ways, stay close to me and do exactly as I say. In the meantime, there are many interesting sights you are missing that could contribute to your wisdom, or to your peril in the future," I said brightly, regaining the girlish figure he knew so well. "Like those two beggars that have followed us for 3 days," I continued. "You have not noticed them, no? Rest assured they are not beggars, and if they get any closer to us, they will be dealt with." "Look there!" I yelled, pointing towards a swarm of plump, sleek cats, lounging about, cleaning each other in post-prandial bliss. "You recall that parade of yellow-cloaked priests I saved you from? You will notice they are nowhere to be seen. The only hints of what befell them is that pile of bones. There was yet some sweet and succulent morsels clinging to their remains, left behind by the legendary generosity of that feline tribe. I could not resist reaching down to scratch the neck of a handsome orange fellow who purred happily and licked my hand. Chorus. Some have said that it is a great curse to meet your gods face to face, or your heroes, and perhaps those luminaries among the sacred ancestors are the very worst of all. The Song of Innsmouth, stanza 179. 10. The Case of Casubel Carter. Maribeth and Casubel were swept along by a wave of jostling bodies as it flooded into the great hall of audiences, where petitions were laid at the feet of Randolph Carter. But by the time the two dreamers made their way to that marble dais, laden with sumptuous furs and silks, the great Carter had wearied of it all and retired to his private chambers for his supper. "We have to find my uncle," Casubel yelled. "We've come too far, and I refuse to leave without speaking to him," Casubel protested angrily. "We shall," Maribeth replied, walking up to the towering guards and speaking to them in some barked guttural patois Casubel could not begin to make out. The guards glanced his way. Then one of them turned and slammed a massive carved knocker on a bronze door the height of 2 men, waited for a reply, and then disappeared inside. Casubel paced back and forth like a panther, as hundreds of tiny oil lamps sputtered to life and filled the hall with light that danced over the walls like a procession of jinns. Maribeth made herself as comfortable as possible on the cold floor, and considered what might happen next, and what might happen after that, depending. After many hours, the last of the candles sputtered and died, and the light of the sun heralded the arrival of a new day. A guard approached Maribeth and handed her a small scroll. She opened it, considered its contents, then made her way over to Casubel. "Here, see for yourself what I could have warned you of," she said, shoving the parchment into his hands. "They tell me you are some sort of relative of mine, and from the waking world. Imagine that. Well, I have so few memories of that place, and I cannot fathom why you have sought me out, if indeed, as you claim, you are kin to the Carter clan I left behind so long ago. But I am not a cruel man. My retainers will give you such food and water as you may require, as well as directions to the great stairway, which is the shortest route back to wherever it is you call home. Farewell, Carter. I regret I cannot meet with you and hear of your travels, but I leave before moonrise to do penance at the 37 shrines of Leng, where the old gods dance, and perhaps may show favour upon my offerings and supplications. I know not when or if I shall return. Safe journeys, Carter, and warmest greetings to your lady companion, whose patriarch I have known these many long years, in the waking world and beyond. Randolph Carter. Chorus. It is written that no soul may breach a crossroads without much reflection. But if he attempts to do so, it is at his very great peril, no matter the seemingly insignificant size and import of that crossroads. Ponder well, O traveller, when next you come upon any place where two paths meet and cross. The Song of Innsmouth, Parable 3. 11. The Memoirs of Maribeth Pickman. I can't believe my grandfather's uncle would turn me out into the streets, Casubel grumbled sullenly, without even speaking to me. And now you know, I said flatly. Consider it a blessing, I should say. Steady on there, Maribeth. A blessing? Casubel barked, looking at me as though I'd gone absolutely mad. Yes, a very great blessing. Can't you see? Now you are finally free, no longer tied to your uncle and whatever fantasies you've clung to about him for so long. You're no longer trapped within the wake of another man's dreams. Your story is now your own to write, so write it. But choose carefully with what chapters you fill its pages, and with what denizens you people its stage. But he began. No, that is exactly what you did, thinking you might turn up on the doorstep of one of the two greatest dreamers of all time and be swept in and given a place of distinction in his world. Oh no, Casubel, there are no shortcuts to glory or infamy in the dreaming lands, as there are among the waking world. You must earn each and every step by your own wits, and the stakes are forever inestimably high, the horizons always dangerously steep. Now you have to decide. Wander here like a dead man feeding the creatures we saw in that market, or come with me, I said, gripping his shoulders happily. Join our colleagues where they witness what may be the final siege of Innsmouth. Choose wisely and with haste, Casubel. I'm leaving now. And with that I turned and made for the massive bronze doors leading out into the street, neither knowing nor really caring if he followed me or not. Chorus. The sages tell us that the small crossroads we meet in every moment are more powerful than the mighty causeways built by the gods across the stars to confound us, and should be entered quickly and without fear. The Song of Innsmouth, Parable 97. 12. The Case of Casubel Carter. Maribeth, wait! Casubel yelled over the throng as it eddied around her in the bustling morning street. Well, what have you decided? She asked, regarding him closely. I'll go with you. My way is with the Dreamswimmers, I know that. I just had to see if there was anything for me here. But it seems sadly there is not. I guess all my life great-uncle Randolph was. He continued, then fell silent. That's good. A wise choice. There's no point pondering the unwise choices we discard. Now we make for Innsmouth, and you will consider the many disasters you so narrowly escaped on our journey here. Ponder them quietly to yourself, as meditations, perhaps, she instructed, her meaning burning into him like a hot brand, but he also noticed the smile she attempted to hide. And those two followers remain, so be prepared. Looking upon the palace they had just vacated, Casubel almost retched, and he had to turn away. The marble edifice resembled more a living behemoth constructed to mislead the eye and give the appearance of a mere stone. It was of an utterly nonsensical design, and although he could see throngs of people flooding in and out of that marble of demonic ingenuity, he could see no windows or doors of any kind, nothing that would allow entry in either direction, and still they poured in and out in an unending parade. Casubel wondered what this said about his uncle, the very man who had built this marvel of architecture. Walking in silence, they passed more fire pits of smoking meats, flesh Casubel had greedily sought to consume, until Maribeth had struck it from his hand into the dirt. She had warned him not to eat anything, that his life depended on it, but he had disregarded her admonitions and almost taken a bite of the steaming morsel. And on they went, weaving through the colourful stalls, each revealing the terrifying secrets he had ignored on their first passage through this wonderland. He also noticed how Maribeth quickened her pace on this hasty retreat. He had time now to look more closely. The city was magnificent. Hundreds of brightly coloured flags rippled in the breeze from every pinnacle, tower, and minaret. The stalls were stacked to overflowing with treasures the likes of which he had never seen. Puppets that spoke in 100 languages with no one pulling their strings. Horns and flutes and drums fashioned of lapis lazuli, the purest blue of the last moment of sunset, and carnelian, the colour of fresh-drawn blood. These instruments produced music so sweet he cried with joy, and yet he shuddered to think what horrors lay coiled and ready to spring from every booth, and hidden beneath every warm smile and waving hand. He saw mountains of sumptuous clothing, piles and trunks of jewels, fine-tooled boots, cloaks worthy of an archbishop's enthronement, and elaborate feathered hats in a dazzling profusion, and fashioned of the most costly and luxurious fabrics imaginable. Books and manuscripts by the thousands lay in stacks and heaped upon tables and pouring out of trunks, some costing more than the contents of a dozen other booths combined. At one stall, lined with couches and draperies of precious silks and velvets, a gaggle of old toothless crones smoked on pipes, wafting a sickly sweet haze that enabled them to tell fortunes that never faltered nor failed. The waiting line for this booth alone was days long. Casubel reflected carefully on all of this. Everything was so enchanting, so marvellous that he could not fathom how anything evil could befall him amidst such beauty, and that perhaps Maribeth was being too protective. As they walked, Casubel tried to pry what information he could from his sphinx-like companion, but so many dazzling sights vied for his attention. One barker yelled proudly from his stall, filled with whirligigs and jesters' heads on sticks that called out to him in poetry and verse, lambasting him with a barrage of bawdy taunts that made him blush at their suggestive commentary on his relationship with Maribeth, who roared with laughter at the silly spectacle. One gaunt salesman, who eyed them a little too closely for Casubel's liking, offered wares he found most unsettling. These objects were unspeakably distasteful to the eye, but he could not get them out of his mind. But neither could he remember what they were exactly when he left the stall. He vowed silently that one day he would return and buy something from that gentleman, regardless of the cost. After some while on the road, Casubel remembered a tattered old book he had secreted away from the bazaar. A bookseller had pressed it into his hands before refusing payment and returning to his booth. He buried his hand in his pocket to make sure the book was still there. Later, they entered a squalid village, barely more than a few stone hovels, and came upon a group of youths squatting in the middle of the dusty street. Their flesh was nothing but dried leather stretched over shockingly exposed bones. Clustered in groups of 2 or 3, they smeared noxious, greasy concoctions generously over their naked flesh, their eyes rolling back in an obscenity of ecstasy. By the smells wafting off the pathetic creatures' bodies, Casubel suspected the tincture consisted primarily of the fermented dung of beasts, or worse. "Maribeth, what can you tell me about this?" he said, turning away from this sordid spectacle and pulling the slender old volume from his pocket and reading. She made herself like unto the candle in the sun, as the need was upon her. But through this all she was ever her father's daughter, a ghoul, ancient of days and terrible to behold, a ghoul out of time, and as a ghoul she must ever feed. The Psalm of Maribeth Pickman. "Oh, that," she said, roaring with laughter. "An old yarn, but not without a thread of truth. But then, just how old are you?" he thought. "And are we still being followed? Keep your thoughts on the road, Casubel, and we'll achieve our destination much more quickly. And yes, they are still with us." Chorus. Old dreams walk as stars in the dark places between dead worlds. But of the dreamers who birthed them, we must never speak but in silence. The Song of Innsmouth, Bridge 4, Paradox 17. 13. The Memoirs of Maribeth Pickman. It seemed at times that we flew or swam or were carried along on unseen currents Casubel could not but guess upon. As we neared the gate of dream, he stared at me curiously. "I will go with you on whatever task awaits us," he assured me hesitantly. I knew he found me strange, transformed, and he did not know what to make of it. The ghoul bears no resemblance to the pretty young thing he thought he fancied back in his comfortable rooms at Miskatonic. "Very well, but there is something you're not saying to me," I said. "You're so changed, Maribeth. I hardly know you," he exclaimed. "You do hardly know me," I said incredulously. He noticed how I towered over him now, though stooped and grey and utterly nude. But it was my eyes that filled him with terror. I howled again at the look upon his face. Gone was the Maribeth he had known these 4 years. It was my father's daughter who chilled him to his bones. You insist on forgetting that my father is a ghoul, that I am all that he has engraved upon my flesh. You forget that you alone of our dreaming companions are but a mortal man. You must rid yourself of your fear of us, or you will be cast out, for your own good, and for the good of our dreaming. Now look ahead, and behold the great staircase. I loped quickly ahead, confident that Casubel would take whatever measures were needed to follow me. Before us lay the grand stairway that led from the deepest places of dream back into the waking world. It was a magnificent thing to behold, as ancient as time itself, and densely carved with thousands of mythic creatures and fantastical monsters, some familiar, some forgotten for 1,000,000 years, some never beheld by the eyes of those from the waking lands. Casubel and I had come through the land of dream. Randolph Carter had been found. He had made his interests in my companion known, and our fellow dream-swimmers waited for us in Innsmouth. The two who had followed us for so long on this journey had melted away, and I no longer felt their presence. I did not know if they were friend or foe, nefarious denizens of this place out for a piece of our hide, or trackers sent by Pickman to ensure our safety. I set upon those fabled steps that brought us out of dream, Casubel not far behind me. Unique among the dream-swimmers, my friend was but a man, and as such could choose a man's fate and journey. The other dream-swimmers had no such freedoms, and their Innsmouth nature laid out their course before them. Gilman's, Whately's, Marsh's, as did the ways of the ghoul shape mine. And so we ascended, each to the fate that awaited us. Chorus. There is a story from long ago that the old gods led by Azathoth created the world, but they did not like what they had brought into being, so they destroyed it in a great and terrible conflagration. But a thing that is created by the old gods led by Azathoth, may never be truly unmade. So they hid it away, out of sight, and soon it became known as the Land of Dream, the place to which we all must go when the gods of sleep come upon us, as it is decreed we must at the end of day, and to the ending of all days. Now, word has it among the lesser gods, and oh, how they love these rumours when they speak to man. They say that Azathoth has now grown bored with the dayside world, and is thinking of putting it all aside, in favour of something new. The Song of Innsmouth, stanza 52. 14. The Chronicles of the Marsh family. Matthias Marsh, upon the deck of the Star of Azathoth, head straight into the darkest roiling heart of the storm. In his possession are numerous documents, ancient ship's logs and cargo manifests, the crumbling volumes removed from the ancestral home of his father's fathers, before the men of the landward side ever set foot upon these shores. These included the original charter for the town of Innsmouth, the complete Psalms of Dagon, the secret laws of the 10 great matriarchs, the last treaty with Ghouldom, dated 1632, and annotated with pertinent signatures and addendums in 1752, included are tracings from the stone tablet discovered in the Mariana Trench, and referred to in certain circles as the Sabbatai de Batrachia, which identifies all the peoples of the ancient sea islands and their affiliations with the founding Hierophant of Devil Reef, along with the maps and charts of trade winds and secret sea currents necessary to carry the marsh vessels to their shores. The Star of Azathoth's captain tasted the north wind, the conch horns pierced the night, and the noble prow of that glorious ship sliced into the cresting waves and disappeared, plunging headlong into those hidden citadels beyond the sea floor. Postscript. This was the year of the great sequestering, when the crowned matriarch of Innsmouth and Devil Reef, majestic Marsh, and the young heiress Whippoorwill Marsh go into seclusion to undertake the training necessary for the girl's assumption of the crown upon the final glorious transformation of her body. It is presumed this was achieved successfully with the aid of the Dreamswimmers and their guide, Maribeth Pickman, for the crowning of Whippoorwill is thoroughly chronicled in later volumes of the family annals. This concludes Folio 237. The archival work under my diligent supervision at Miskatonic University Library continues briskly and ever apace as it touches deeper into the ancestral histories of Arkham, Innsmouth, and those sacred waters of Devil Reef. And I remain ever your faithful servant in Dagon's great and terrible name, the Translator. The fate and whereabouts of Casubel Carter, however, remain uncertain as of this writing.
If you enjoyed listening today, be sure to subscribe to the channel by hitting the red subscribe button below. After doing so, click the bell icon next to the subscribe button to receive new content notifications. If you'd like to support our work and receive exclusive perks, consider becoming a channel member by clicking the join button below. To support us in other ways, see the video description for links to our Bandcamp and Patreon pages and further information relating to our releases on Audible, iTunes, and Spotify. And until next time,